Back now to the race for the White House. Donald Trump is comparing the current state of American foreign policy to the Cold War era. The Republican nominee will campaign in Wisconsin later today. This is the day after he gave a speech in Ohio calling for extreme vetting and ideological tests for immigrants and the children of immigrants trying to enter this country.
And with us now to break down Trump's latest foreign policy pitch is Mike Baker, a former CIA covert operations officer and president of Diligence LLC. Thanks for joining us.
Sure, thank you.
So let's start with this idea of extreme vetting. You know, he's not the only one that has said there is a problem in terms of vetting and people coming to this country, but he was light on specifics.
Right.
Is there a way to vet better than what we are doing and improve on this? Is there a way to extreme vet?
Well, there's always a way to improve what we're doing, right? I mean, it's a human process. You're relying on databases, infrastructure that in some countries it just doesn't exist. So, you know, if you're looking to do due diligence or background vetting on someone who is coming here from Russia or someone who's coming from the former Soviet Union, as he's trying to relate this to the Cold War, then you know, there were ways to do that. You know, you could do that, even back then, you could do that through databases and information that would be somewhere in a repository somewhere. You're talking about bringing somebody in from Syria where records don't exist. And so you can improve it. The problem is that we're having a discussion about something that we really, you know, we're starting here rather than going from the beginning and saying, okay, well, let's look at the system that we've currently got and let's examine and talk about what we currently do. Let's look at the gaps and the holes and rationally say, let's do whatever else that we can do that makes sense. We're not having that discussion. We're just declaring, well, the whole system's broken, we need to fix it. Well, it's not broken. You know, there's various levels of vetting that goes on depending on the category of person coming in. And so work is being done. But I can say that it can definitely be improved when we're talking about certain parts of the Middle East. We had a lot of people out in Iraq, as an example, several years ago, doing work out there, including trying to do due diligence on individuals. Well, you almost have to get into the village level. If you want to get information about somebody's background, associations, activities, to do a normal background check, prior to them being employed, as an example, you have to get that granular. Because, again, there's not a repository of information. You don't just search it on Google to find out.
It's interesting, Mike. I mean, as you point out, there are some countries that are able to do a type of vetting. For example, Israel is very, very thorough when you fly into that country, and so there are methods that can be used. But Trump is talking about ideological screening. He's talking about the children of immigrants, right, who may in some cases be already be American citizens. So it's, for a lot of people, I guess I'm trying to figure out, when he says countries or regions in the world where there's been some volatility. This country, if you want to use Belgium or France, he pointed to those examples in his speech yesterday as countries that have had recent terrorist attacks. The number of people killed in Belgium and in France pales in significance to the 3,000 that we lost on 9/11. Another country could say, well, the United States is also a hotbed of terrorism. If you want to use these type of broad terms, am I right about that?
No, you are. I think when you start talking about this ideological sense, or you start talking about we're looking to look at all the immigrants and their children, and people, you know, instinctively tighten up a little bit. It makes people uncomfortable, and it should, right? Because what does that mean? What are we talking about here? And so, yes, I think you get a little bit guarded, and that's an appropriate response. Nobody wants to just open the doors and say, you know what, if you're a terrorist or a terrorist sympathizer, or you've been involved in a support cell for a terrorist organization, come on in.
I'm going to tell you that if you ask me that question.
Exactly. But the point being is, of course, common sense says, yes, we want to know who's coming in. Okay, that makes sense. But again, what we're missing is a common sense discussion about it. And I think trying to identify countries and saying, okay, we're going to work with the State Department and the State Department's going to tell us which countries are problematic, so we're just going to put a stop on those locations until we can figure out the vetting. That's going to be really, really difficult, you know, frankly, because as you pointed out, we're not in the old days where it's this country and there's a border around it. Everything's very fluid. It's a very shrinking globe nowadays. And so, yeah, do we talk about Europe as well? I don't think we do. So this is where I think people rightly so point to that speech and his discussion about immigration, and they think, what?
Right. Yeah. And sort of one of his overriding themes was to compare today's challenge with what he says the ideology of radical Islam to what we dealt with during the Cold War. Do you think that's a fair comparison?
At the 30,000-foot level, I can see what he's saying. It's an ideology, and
That
so
is anti-American.
right. And there is at the Muslim extremist level, there's this desire to take over the world, this desire to create this massive caliphate that just keeps spreading, and much like the communist goal of the Cold War. So, but once you get past that 30,000 foot level, you start lowering. It doesn't hold up. It's apples and oranges. It doesn't really work. Look. The problem is also that it doesn't fit into a nice, tidy box. We talk about ISIS. We talk about the battle against ISIS and, well, are we winning or not? Well, you know what? We are winning against ISIS. Are we winning against Muslim extremism? Well, no. So
because that's a thought, and
right.
It's not necessarily, we can win on the battlefield. We
Exactly.
can take out their leaders. We can take out some of their targets. We can take back cities that they've taken control of. But combating ideology is a little harder.
Right, and people have a hard time processing that. Then they look and it feels like it's worse, right? But the administration is saying we're winning against ISIS. Well, that's correct, and it also feels worse. So these two things can exist together, but it makes people uncomfortable, frankly.
All right, Mike Baker, thank you so much.
Sure, thank you.